Hi, everybody. Welcome to Fabulously Candice. Holy cow, it's been a minute since we've recorded. There's been so much going on this year. We're at season 3, episode 4, and I must say this is going to actually be our last season for a few reasons. So we're taking full advantage of interviewing the most amazing individuals on our podcast as we end or wrap up Fabulously Candice. But today I want to introduce Ben VanHook. Hi, Ben.
Hello, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I love that you're on with me. So let me brag about you. Ben is autistic ADHD, so like me, and is an expert on the autistic student experience. He's spoken at Stanford and has been featured in programs from PBS to the New York Times. He has authored articles for the American Psychological Association and advised groups from the Open Mainframe Project to Partners in Promise. Ben is currently a master's student studying public policy at George Mason University. That's pretty awesome. With the hopes of reforming employment and education policy to make both domains more inclusive for neurodivergent individuals. Wow, Ben. That is quite the bio.
Thank you. I'm doing my best to support our community. It's sometimes a little bit difficult because I'm also a master's student, so it's sometimes difficult balancing studies with work, with advocacy, but I do my best to do well in school and kind of manage my time in school as well as advocacy and my full-time job.
I understand. I will say I used to be on LinkedIn so much more, but there's just so much going on outside of social media that I'm in the same boat. So I feel you. It's like we want to balance that advocacy with what we're doing in the real world. And we're doing a lot of advocacy in the real world too, right?
We are, yes.
Yeah. So tell me, do you feel comfortable just talking a little bit about you're diagnosed as autistic ADHD? Was that something that you were later diagnosed, or is it something that you were diagnosed when you were younger?
So it's interesting because I was diagnosed when I was younger. I think I was about 5 or 6. And I went from a public elementary school to a private middle school and a private high school to help me through my education, and so I could be in smaller classes, and so I could have more individualized attention to help me get through schooling. But the thing was, at the time, I didn't really think that I was going into these smaller classes for my autism. I didn't really know I had autism, so my parents kind of hid that diagnosis from me until I was in high school. And the reason why I thought I was going to school into private middle schools and high schools was because I was bullied a lot for my race and ethnicity in elementary school, and I kept asking my parents to send me to another school district, just get me out of the public school system. So I thought they were sending me to these private schools to protect me from the bullies, but I only found out in 12th grade. As I was applying to colleges, I was autistic because my college counselor told me that it would be really useful if we looked at colleges with autism programs. And my first reaction was shock. What is autism? Is it dangerous? Is it something that I should be afraid of? What is it? And that's how the conversation got started. And I kind of carry that conversation at home, where I asked my parents a little bit about autism and a little bit about what it was like being different and why it's important for me to go to these schools with autism programs. And I was able to learn more about myself. I was able to learn about why supports at these programs would be really beneficial to me. And it really helped me understand myself better, having these open, honest conversations.
I love that. And so do you find that because of your experience, smaller classrooms, more open conversations, that's also inspired you to want to advocate for change in the employment arena as well as in the education arena?
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think having these conversations and having a neuro-affirming space to do so is really important. And One of the ways in which I'm trying to reform employment is that I'm trying to create different neurodivergent advisory boards and advisory panels at different organizations to provide neurodivergent employees a space for them to get their needs met, for them to advocate for themselves and their community, and also provide for a resource for people who might not be as comfortable self-advocating for themselves.
Yeah.
Just knowing that you have an ally in the workplace, or knowing that you have a group of people who are who are behind you and who you can rely upon is really important to an employee's emotional and psychological well-being. So it definitely has translated to my work with employment and wanting to provide for these safer, smaller, different groups for people to be a part of.
Well, I love that. And as you were talking, I was thinking of my own experience. I am going back to school in the fall. And so by the time I complete it, I'll be 50. It's a very short program. It's a advanced certificate training program. And when I did my interview, so my application went through and then I had an interview to get in. The woman that interviewed me grilled me on autism. How do you know you're autistic? So I found myself, quote, proving my autism, and just kind of that same rhetoric of, well, I used to work with autistic males, here or doing research. And so I felt very shut down, and it was the very first question, and I had about an hour with her. And so it was, I had to keep it together, but afterwards I cried. And so I love that you're thinking about this in terms of, yeah, we've got to change this so that autistic folks and neurodifferent folks have support going into the education system, no matter how old we are. And then also with employment, because, well, the first thing I think is we shouldn't have to prove ourselves. People really need to be educated. If we're talking now about being culturally sensitive, I really look at autism and neurodifference as it's a neurological culture. And so, because there's so much, I guess, push for let's be multiculturally diverse and sensitive to diversity when it comes to cultures and ethnicity. Well, let's be neurologically sensitive as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way to think about it. Neuro-inclusivity, having a separate culture for neurodivergent individuals. And I think we can break that down even further and say there's even subcultures within this culture. And that's where intersectionality comes in, because
Yes.
neurodivergents who are part of the LGBTQIA plus community, we have neurodivergents who are of racial and ethnic minorities, and we have neurodivergent individuals who, like myself, are adopted, and that comes with a whole different set of challenges, but also a whole different set of strengths. Like, for example, being adopted comes with an intense fear of abandonment from anyone and everyone in our own professional lives. But it also makes us more compassionate, and it also makes us a lot more empathetic towards others who have really similar challenges or who have been abandoned in the past. So these different intersections can create different sub or micro cultures within this larger neuroculture. So I really like that way of thinking about it. I think I really like the example and the story you used about the interview itself, because I've also been pushing for interview reforms, and I've been pushing for universal design in the workplace as well as education, and being able to tailor each aspect of someone's job to their strengths, and being able to provide for the most accommodating environment from the outset for neurodivergent employees. And one of the ways in which this can get started is in the application process. The job description is the first thing that many people see when applying for a job. And a lot of times the job description is inaccessible because it's long, it's very lengthy.
Yeah.
A lot of times the terms required versus preferred requirements are not really distinguished. So if we see a requirement and we're just like, nope, we don't have that, even if we have 5 or 6 others, I don't apply because I'm afraid they're going to grill me on that one aspect that I don't have. And And that's what happened a few times. But even moving past like the job description and going off of the job description, like there's language terminologies, like what exactly is competency in or familiarity in? Because I can be competent in the tool, I can have like knowledge in 95% of like an app or tool, but I might not be competent in the 5% that you need me to do for the job. So I've been advocating for a lot more specific guidelines as to what we'll be doing, what we'll need to use these skills for in the job description.
Brilliant.
Moving past the job description, there's interview process, and there's a lot of different accessibility things that can be put in place that are free, like sending the questions ahead of time, putting the questions in writing, adding closed captioning to the Zoom call, allowing for the interview itself to be like had through Zoom, because some people are really stringent and want you to come in person, and adding more task-based like assignments to the interview, so it's not just you talking, but it's you actually showing what you can do, because a lot of times for me, I struggle to make eye contact. I also fidget a lot during interviews. I'm also sometimes tripping over my words because of my anxiety or because I'm just really nervous all the time. So being able to offset those by adding in some competency-based tasks could really help the process go a bit smoother. And then comes the transition to the workplace. And a lot of times the training is difficult, has been difficult for me because it was like given in a non-inclusive manner. So for my current job, how they trained me was they made me read like 30, 15-page documents that were unrelated to each other with no context. And what I wanted and what I asked for was if my supervisor or the person training me could actually go through the task with me and give me on-the-spot feedback. And it was a bit hard because I do work for a smaller organization, so people do have like a lot of things to get done. It's not like people can cover for them. So there was this one task that was really important. It was basically providing our resources to like our consumers. And that was a really important part because I was managing our online store. And for one whole month, people weren't getting any of the orders they asked for. And this was during Autism Acceptance Month out of all months. And because they didn't know how to do this task, they weren't getting their orders all month. They weren't getting the resources they requested or needed. So finally, my supervisor sat down with me, went through the task with me one-on-one, gave me feedback. And within 15 minutes, I got it. I just understood it. It just became so much easier because she was able to go through it with me versus having me read these confusing documents. So
I love it.
Is really important.
Well, I love how you just walked us through that. And it's like, wouldn't it be nice if we had instructions for dating? We're going to get there, I promise. I do want to say two things. As neurodivergent folks, I know for me, I'm very rejection sensitive. And so, yeah, I see you're agreeing with that. It's like when you talked about, okay, we look up these job descriptions, right? And we have 5 out of like 7 things that we do, but it's those 2 things that it's like, okay, if we perceive that we're going to get rejected, it's like, nope, whereas someone else, perhaps who's not neurodivergent, might say, I'm going to go for it, right? So I love that you brought that up. I also want to say, one thing that I've noticed, and my world is all about intimacy and relationships. I mean, I'm truly an intimacy expert. And so I work with a lot of couples and mixed and same neurotype. And what I talk a lot about is that how we define words is very different. And so like you were saying, if you read something like competency, the way you might define it might actually be really different for an employer. And that's the same in relationship, where like how I define love, intimacy, connection might be very different from, well, it often is. I mean, I've learned this from my partner of 12 years, that the way we define words is just different. So my language and the words I use in my autism culture are different from his language and what he uses. So I just want to say that, because I think that's really important for our listeners to think about that words matter. And as part of the neurodivergent culture, how I define and speak words are just different. So are you okay if we transition? I wanted to start out with maybe more of a safe topic of talking about your expertise before I move into a little more. I think, people tend to get a little bit squirmy and uncomfortable when I talk about dating or intimacy, even sex. And so let me just start with that question. Wouldn't it be nice if there were instructions on dating?
Wish there was like a manual for dating, so we knew what to say, when to say it, how to say it, the tone of voice we are supposed to use.
Yeah.
Dating is so dynamic with so many different moving factors and so many, and that's not even like mentioning the factors that like contribute to the other people, like the factors other people are like thinking about us. So there's so much that we have to consider about ourselves and
So much
about the other person.
So are you dating?
Right now I'm trying to date. It's really difficult because kind of the position I'm in, I'm out of college, I'm in grad school now. So it's hard to find people like my age. And I'm not really sometimes going to social locations, like going to bars or going to restaurants or going to like clubs or things that are similar are really challenging for me on a social and sensory level because it's really loud, and you also have like a lot of people around, so you don't really have that much personal space, and it can also just be really overwhelming from a sensory perspective. So it can be really difficult to find people to date like once we're out of college, or at least that was my experience. I've gone on a few dating sites, like applications like Kiki, for example, and it's been hard to like find dates there because it's not many people are on the apps.
Yeah, I love how you talked about bars. And, I've interviewed other folks that have said that too. And I agree with you. It is so sensory overloaded. And there's just too much going on. People are up in your biz, in your personal space. It's loud. It's just, I have not been to a bar in a very long time. And so I agree with you. It's like, where are those safe places where we can find people? If I were dating, I would want to know that. I get that apps are like the big thing, but even then it's still like there's no manual. And then how do you screen people properly? Because I do think the diagnosis of autism equates to vulnerability. We are vulnerable to being manipulated and really overly trusting. I don't know if you've experienced that just even in friendships. I know I have. And so
for me as well, especially being like an intersexual individual who has been abandoned in the past. That's how my story began, in a train station. I was abandoned in China, which is right underneath Eastern Russia. It has a nice festival each year, but I was abandoned in China in a train station at 6 months old.
wow.
And since then, it's hard because like I've been desperate for different relationships. I've been desperate to like become close to people, but I've also been really afraid to become close to people as well. So it's kind of this catch-22 situation of me wanting to like be in a close relationship with people, but also being afraid of like the rejection and the abandonment that might happen should that like situation occur.
Well, I just have so much compassion for you, Ben, with your story. And, when you talk about that, just that intersectionality factor, and again, being abandoned as a key component for you, being adopted, and then having this fear wanting to connect, it is just that challenge, right? Where I feel that same way, where I want to connect. But then I've had these experiences where I feel like I can trust people. I'm having it right now with this friend group where, gosh, they were so nice in the beginning, and supportive. And now it's like, they're not even, I shared, hey, I got into this program, it's really competitive. I'm so excited. And crickets, just ignored the text, like just mean girl. And so that struggle, even as adults, you and I are adults, but even that experience of being bullied, right? It's like, and I'm not even talking about an intimate relationship. I know in intimate relationships and dating, we can be victims of bullying, but I'm talking about just even friendship. So, and then, so that component I think is really challenging because I'm with you. Well, I'm open. I just am loving. I want to be friends with everyone. And then I even see it in our autism community on social media sometimes where there's just this judgment. And instead of getting to know me, for instance, people can just be mean. And so have you experienced that, like you said, with friends, where it's like, even as an adult, where you're just wanting to be open and connect, and even friends, it's not as easy.
Yeah, it's really difficult. I'm really sorry you had that experience with your friend group. Like, you were open, you were vulnerable, and you shared something that was really exciting about yourself, and they kind of ostracized you and didn't really respond. And that's something else that has been challenging in the past for me, and that is like setting boundaries and knowing when others are setting boundaries, because a lot of times when they set boundaries, it's usually like these implicit boundaries that we're just expected to know, instead of people explicitly saying, hey, I can't talk at this time, or hey, if you don't hear from me, I might be busy. Or so a lot of times if I send someone a message and like within like 1 or 2 or 3 days I don't hear back, I kind of feel like I feel personally attacked, or I just feel like they're not really interested in.
Well, and that happens with dating, like the ghosting situation, right? With my friend group, what's interesting is they responded to part of we started a ketamine program at Namaste Center for Healing. So they said, congrats on serving ketamine, but didn't even acknowledge that I got into this certificate program. So they responded right away. They were super supportive of one of my other friends, said one line that was just like me, and then completely ignored and then moved on. And then one friend was even really cold and distant with me in a personal text that same day. So I share that so that, because I do get a lot of listeners, and even on LinkedIn, where there's a lot of assumptions. Oh, you're overreacting. Oh, people might be busy. But I feel like I know from my own experience, autistic people, we're actually quite intuitive. And we're picking up energy since we've been little. We're picking up on all the energy around us, which people focus on, oh, we're sensory sensitive, but we're also energy sensitive. And part of that is because I believe there isn't this direct communication. It's very vague. You know, I really feel like the neuromajority communicates in a very vague way, like you said, implicit boundaries and kind of just these assumptions, and we're just left guessing. So I think we have this gift of we're feeling the energy of what's going on. And oftentimes I think we're accurate. And then what happens is we call it out. Hey, we just say it directly. I noticed this. And then I don't know if you've experienced this, but then we're gaslighted. So again, whether it's friends or in relationship, where it's like we start to question ourselves. So there's a lot of dynamics, I think, that go into relationships, whether it's friendships or intimate relationships, that can be very challenging for us. And I'm just curious, in intimate relationships or dating relationships, if you've had any experiences that you found were really rewarding, where the person was really loving and understanding, or the flip side where they weren't so much.
I've only been in one romantic relationship, and that was in college, and I did feel like it was really rewarding. We really understood each other. We were able to do things. We had really similar interests because we were both psychology majors, and she was also autistic as well. So we were able to like set these explicit boundaries, and we were able to study together. We also we knew like where each other's limits were. So we knew not to schedule activities that interfered with like each other's limits, but we also knew like that it's healthy to like spend time away from each other as well. So hanging out with other friends, maybe introducing each other to mutual friends, so we can kind of have this friend group. And that's honestly what we did our senior year of college. We had a group of me, her, and her roommate and her roommate's boyfriend at the time, and we just hung out every single weekend. We went out to different restaurants that weren't really too crowded, because it was Erie, Pennsylvania, so it wasn't really the big
Mm.
city. So it was a really nice small town, quiet town. So we would schedule trips to the beach. We would go to different restaurants. We would go bowling every once in a while. We would go to the park and just do all of these sensory friendly things whilst hanging out with each other as a friend group. And we'd also like when we're alone, we would like be a little bit more intimate, but we knew when to be a little bit more professional and when to be a
Yeah.
little bit due to these explicit boundaries and due to having experiences with like dating each other as neurodivergent individuals.
I love that. I love all the things you said. Again, the explicit boundaries.
But
Go
it's also
ahead.
really funny because it's also really funny because the way we got into a relationship was this was both our first relationships. So she came over, she lived in Arizona. So she came to DC just to hang out over the summer, and we were on the couch watching a movie. And she said something like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if like we were like this couple in the movie? And I agreed with that. And we didn't really know how to like ask if we wanted to be in a relationship, but we both wanted it because we both like thought it would be really cool, and we both were really close to each other, and we were good classmates, good colleagues, and good friends at the time. So basically what happened, how we got into a relationship was I just said, okay, on the count of 3, we say it's official. Because we didn't really know at the time like how relationships work. So I just was like 1, 2, 3, and we both shouted it's official. And that's kind of
I love it.
how we got into that relationship.
I love it. It's like it gets to be whatever works for people, that's my motto. It's like whatever works for people, and I love it. And how long were you with her?
So I think it was about 2.5, 3 years. It was difficult during COVID because we weren't really seeing each other because like we took classes from home, but we still like maintain communication through text and everything. But I think it was like 2.5 years. We met when I was in my sophomore year of college, and she was in her freshman year because she was a grade below me. I didn't know she was in the autism program until like we started talking about the autism program at the college, and we just found out that we were both in it. So
I love it. I mean, I think that again, that's not just meeting someone on a dating app or at a bar, but you can meet people in real life, whether it's at work or school, finding similar interests. And what are your thoughts, Ben? Do you feel like for you, it makes sense to look for someone who has a similar brain type? Like if you're dating, are you interested in dating someone who's autistic rather than not?
I think it might make the communication process easier, because like a lot of autistics have had like similar experiences when it comes to rejection, when it comes to being misunderstood. So I think it helps with the connection piece, but I also think like having similar interests, having similar goals does help. So I think having both, a mixture of like someone who is neurodivergent, but also someone who's compatible, someone who has similar interests and maybe like has the same hobbies as you is really important. So
I agree.
I think just having a mixture. I mean, I date a neurotypical person if they like had similar interests and goals as me, or if they weren't like completely different from me.
Yeah. And I think just again, if there was respect for your culture, your neurologically different culture, right? It's like respect and patient with each other as you learn your language and you learn the behavior around it, right? And you're just kind of navigating that. I agree with you. It's funny now when I work with couples, Ben, if one person's autistic, I'm starting to observe and screen the other person as well, because what I'm noticing is more often than not, there might be an identified autistic person in the relationship, but the other person might be ADHD and or autistic. So it's really interesting because I do think like attracts like, and I think neurology attracts neurology. I joke with Chris, my partner, that I actually see a lot of autistic traits with Chris, and he doesn't want to take on a label. I get it. So it's like, okay, But I notice myself being more patient with him when he gets really rigid and stuck in like a certain, it's like, okay, it's got to look this way. Or maybe he gets where he's just like going into a shutdown, because I know that in my own self. And so I think just those things, being really sensitive to our partners, can be really helpful. Do you mind if I ask how your relationship ended or what happened?
Oh yeah, that sounds good. I did want to just add real quickly that the fact that like we didn't really know we were neurodivergent or the other
Okay.
person was divergent at the time, and I guess it's the same for like you seeing
Yeah.
is autistic and kind of
Yeah.
screening the person. I think that lends a lot of support for the double empathy theory, the theory that we
Yes.
all communicate like in our different styles, and some people communicate with their own neurotype better than others.
Yes.
We do get each other, and like I always joke that I can spot like an autistic person from a crowded bar, a crowded
Me
because of the way
too.
we interact. So
Me
like at least
too.
for me, like I'm near all the food. I'm not interacting with people. I'm like all the way in the background by the food or on my phone.
Yep.
It's I think it lends a lot of support for this double empathy theory, because we didn't really the person was neurodivergent at the time, yet we're able to communicate. And a lot of times, especially, and this even happens in my friend groups, like my friends from like when I was 7 or 8 were later diagnosed as being ADHD or being autistic, and we didn't know we were neurodivergent at the time. We didn't know they were neurodivergent at the time, but we somehow were able to communicate in a way each of us understood, even if the neuro majority didn't really understand that way of thinking. So I think it lends a lot of support for this double empathy theory. When it
I
comes
agree.
about like how my relationship ended, it was just a matter of like a kind of like graduating college. Like I was going back to Virginia, she was staying in Arizona. So we realized that like we could still be friends, and
Oh, good.
but like and we also like have really similar goals of wanting to advocate for the community. So I've been giving
Good.
like resources, and we actually worked on a project together after I graduated
Awesome.
in which we could raise and empower neurodivergent voices. So we've been in contact. I wouldn't say we talk as often because we're like so busy with like grad school and with our own lives in the here and now, but we sometimes talk like when the chance arises and catch
Well,
up.
Ben, the fact that you two still are friends is huge. I mean, you're a success story about a relationship. I love your story.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, I'm really happy that you appreciated hearing about
Yeah.
it. And it was difficult because we also like both had our backs. Like we were both navigating a neurotypical college life together, and we both had to support each other. And we did get support from some of the staff members at the college, because our college did have an autism program we were both part of, so we did get some guidance and some advice around that. But a lot of times we were kind of alone, and we were left to figure things out. And there was one time actually when we were kind of in the car late at night listening to music, and we wanted to like be in the car because we didn't want to disrupt like any of our roommates or anyone else in the apartment. And we had like, I guess we had like late 10 a.m. classes, so we could stay up late at night. But we were like, it was about 9:30 at night, and all of a sudden we see flashing lights. We see the police were behind
Wow.
as we were listening to music, and the police knocked on our door, knocked on my door because it was my car, and he was asking like, what are you doing? Why are you in the car this late night? And it was really intimidating. And we were able to answer all those questions, and they left. But the next morning we were kind of pulled into the like AIM offices, and it was explained to us that when like neurotypical people see like people in cars, their mind automatically wanders to they're having sex in the car, or they're doing something explicit in a public
Wow.
area. So
Wow.
they didn't know we were just listening to music, or we thought as neurodivergents that we were actually doing the respectful thing by taking
Yes.
activity outside. So it was kind of like we were kind of frustrated that, like, even though we were trying to be respectful of others, sleep times and quiet hours, we were still like punished for it.
Yeah.
We weren't punished, but like we were still lectured about it, and it's kind of
Yeah.
it was really confusing for us.
I
But
bet. I appreciate you sharing that story, and I hope that people listening that are not neurodivergent will please be just more open-minded, that just because someone's in a car at night doesn't mean they're doing something explicit or illegal, right? It's like, it's just so fascinating. So thank you for sharing that story, Ben.
mhm. Yeah, it was a stressful situation, but once it was explained to us, like, I guess the explanation didn't really satisfy either of us. We were
Yeah.
up with even more questions, like, why is that the first thing that comes to mind when people
Yeah.
see people in cars late at night?
Uh-huh.
Like, that was literally my first question.
Yeah.
Why is
Yeah.
the automatic implicit mindset?
Yeah. Yeah.
And my second question was, why didn't they come out and ask us what we were doing instead of getting the police involved?
Yeah.
Because if they had questions, they could like text us, or they could, if they didn't have a phone number, they could just like kind of ask us or
Yeah.
something.
The assumptions, right? Again, it just speaks to I really think the poor communication of the neuromajority, where we live in such a knee-jerk reactive society, instead of giving people the benefit of the doubt and being compassionate and patient. So, but I am aware of the time, Ben. It's been so lovely talking with you. You're just an amazing human. Thank you for inspiring the world, and also sharing such a beautiful story about dating. Thank you so much. I know that your story is going to give people inspiration and hope, and also, I mean, you actually, without maybe recognizing it, but you gave some tips. You did, just about like, oh, we take time apart, or we hang out with friends, or, find someone that you have that's similar hobbies and similar interests. And you just did a beautiful job communicating your dating experience. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on Fabulously Candice today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure talking with you and explaining and exploring my experiences and sharing these insights with your community and with the broader neurodivergent community. So thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. Okay, everybody, this is our final season. I'm going to be going on to different things, starting school. Our wonderful podcast producer, Tatum, is also going to graduate school. So there's going to be a transition. So we're just going to savor every moment together as we wrap up season 3. I want to tell all of you that love is the medicine, and we are all love. So please spread love, not hate. And please be tender with your sweet selves. All right, until next time, bye.